And welcome back to Sitting in a Car. I'm Sarah Sproul and I sit in a car with you every week answering a question to help you raise your confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. And for this week is, should I tell my 10-year-old not to tell his sister about sex? She's 8. I haven't discussed it with either of them yet. So even if you don't have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, this conversation is relevant to you because it is fundamentally about, are we allowed to talk about sex? And when I say we, it's not just about us as parents, but our children. Are our children allowed to talk about sex? My brother tells me a story. I might have been 15, he might have been 14, maybe we were even younger than that. And he tells me the story that there was this one night where he was feeling really anxious about this whole thing to do with sex because he had never had that conversation. We traveled around a lot. We had different schools. We started in one school, ended up in another school, and he missed sexuality education, what little there was of it, which was pretty much nothing. Anyway, he came to me one night and he says, I'm worried about how to do sex. I don't know how to do it. And just for the record, just going to break the story here and say, this is a worry that I hear young boys, even now, 11 and 12-year-olds, talk about in sexuality education classes that I run. They are worried about not knowing how to do it. That's a beside the point. Let's get back to the story. And my brother Ben then went on to remind me that at that time I said, well, I didn't know, but I'm sure he'd work it out. Not very helpful. And he still remembers feeling really sort of bereft and sort of low and unsupported. Thank goodness I've learnt more since then, right? But here's the point of that story is that everyone can help everyone else in this world, and siblings can help other siblings out when they have worries or concerns. Now, let's talk about this particular question about a 10 and an 8-year-old. The first point to make is that young children can learn about sexuality from a very young age. If we're talking about sex in relation to new humans being created, so we're talking about sperms and eggs and penises and vaginas, then we can start talking about definitely how the sperm and egg gets together around 6 years old. And in this question, these kids are both older than 6. So it makes sense that they are both able to have this conversation. The second point is when we allow open conversations about sex or sexuality in our family, we create the culture that we are allowed to talk about this stuff at home. And that's really important because going forward, when our children become young people and they're adults and getting towards young adulthood and things are maybe going a little bit wrong, they need to know that they can come to us with questions to do with this part of being human. And we lay the groundwork for that permission from an early age. So 8 and 10, it's a good time to start laying the groundwork for permission of having these conversations in our family. The final point to make is this, that when our children are definitely 10, but maybe 8 as well, they might feel a little bit embarrassed about a conversation to do with sex. And that's because they have had the first part of their life from 0 to whatever age they now, maybe having no conversations or stories about that part of being human. So we are going to have to go gently with them, and we may have to go gently with us as well, because if we don't have a habit of having these conversations, then it's going to feel awkward and unsure for us. And I've spoken in lots of other videos about some of the beginning sentences you can use to start a conversation with slightly older children around 8 and 10, and it goes something like, I learned something new today. I learnt that children of your age should be able to know a lot of information about how babies are made and bodies and sperms and eggs. But we haven't had that conversation in our family, and I'm sorry about that. I'm going to do a better job of that part of my parenting in future, and I'd love your input on that. So let's sum up. The first point is that children around 6 years old can start learning about intercourse and sex and how babies are made in that particular way, sperms and eggs, penises and vaginas. So if you're talking about children 8 to 10, we're well within the age appropriate limits. Second point is siblings can help each other out. So conversations between siblings about things to do with sex is very okay. And in fact, we want to support that in our family because sometimes siblings need to come to other siblings when they don't feel like they can come to us. But the third point is that we want to create normality around these conversations. We want to show our children that we can talk about this and they can come to us if they have any problems. And that's Sitting in a Car for another week where I've answered a question to help you raise your confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. And while I've got you here, can I ask for your help? Would you like or repost this episode of Sitting in a Car if you found it useful? This helps other parents just like you find the support and information they need to do this part of their parenting even better. Bye for now.